Hey everybody, it's Miss Solomon here, and welcome back to this guided reading series for the Iliad. Remember, this video series is meant to support your journey with this epic poem for the week, and because there are some copyright limitations on our Emily Wilson translation, I'm using this talking head model to help you kind of get in a classroom headspace where you and I can just be, hanging out and talking about an important piece of literature. So in this video, we are diving into book 6, which will hit a little different for us because it moves beyond the battlefield and shows us the domestic side of war. We'll see Hector return to Troy, encounter his family, and remind us why this epic is also about not just war, but then the fragile lives behind glory. So let's take a look together. Not all of book 6 is printed in our textbook, so I'll briefly contextualize what happens before our assigned reading starts. So, after book 5, we get a temporary lull in the big time fighting. The Greeks and the Trojans are going to regroup, but the tension still, of course, because it's war, it remains high, kind of in the background. In this space, I think Homer sets the stage for us to step away from the pure combat of it all and be able to look inward, almost symbolically looking inward into the city of Troy itself. This is an important piece of the entire narrative of the Iliad, but it's because it's an important pause. We can infer that Homer is deliberately slowing down the pace for us to reflect and spend this introspective time, which we could arguably say is with the enemy side of the war for a little while. The violence is always on the horizon because it's war, but we get to spend some time with family, duty, and prayer in this book. Think of it kind of as a zooming out from the clashing swords toward the reasons why people fight in wars in the first place. So, at the very opening of book 6, we're going to see Diomedes and Glaucus, a Greek and a Trojan soldier. They're going to face off in battle. But when they exchange some words, they realize their families are connected by ties of quest friendship. So rather than fight, they decide to exchange armor as a sign of respect. And this is a really big deal in Greek culture of the time. So if you have your book with you, turn to page 201 in volume A, where we've been, and follow along with me, starting around line 252. So you see that this is Diomedes speaking. He says, you must be an old quest friend of mine through our forefathers. Their fathers one of them kept a guest for 20 days, and they gave each other splendid gifts of friendship. And so then if you scroll down, skip down to around line 270, it says, plenty of Trojans and their famous allies are left for me to slaughter when a god or quick feet enable me to catch them. And you have many other Greeks to kill whenever you are able. Let us now exchange our arms and armor with each other, so other men will know that we are proud to be each other's quest friends through our fathers. So this scene may seem a little bit strange in the middle of a war, but it highlights an essential Greek value called xenia, Xenia, or quest friendship. Hospitality was sacred, overseen by Zeus himself. So even in the chaos of war, these obligations still persists. In this exchange between Diomedes and Glaucus, we see a lot of gratitude here. Glaucus actually trades golden armor for bronze, which materially is a terrible deal, but Homer isn't focused on the economics. He's showing us that honor and admiration and tradition, those are going to outweigh the immediate economic advantage, which ties their quest friendship even tighter because it's beyond the transaction. There's something a bit more virtuous going on there, which is a nice segue back to Troy, where we will see behind the veil of honor, in a sense. So we see that Hector is called back to the city. He instructs the Trojan women to pray to Athena for protection. And then he visits his mother Hecuba, and then later Paris and Helen. And then he's going to make one last stop for another visit. That's one of my favorites. So I'd like to emphasize here on page 201, it's at the very bottom, this image of Hector that we're given starting around line 284. Okay, so this is the image of Hector entering the city of Troy. Meanwhile, when Hector reached the Scaean gates and oak tree, all the Trojan wives and daughters ran up and gathered round him, asking about their brothers, cousins, sons, and husbands. Isn't that so palpable? Because we see this domestic strain and the anxiety of war through these Trojan women who see Hector and they're like, "Oh, he's gonna know if my husband is okay. He's gonna know if my son is okay." He told them they should calmly, each in turn, pray to the gods, but onto most of them, disaster was already fastened tight. It's a it's a heavy thing, him having to manage the emotions of those who seek his leadership and his comfort, and then still be able to stay strong in that. But see how trusted and admired he is by his own people of Troy. Well, I think we have some reason to understand Achilles over, when we met him in book one, a bit so far. This image of Hector is totally different than the image of Achilles that we've been given so far in our reading. Hector tries to hold it all together, and he's succeeding to the best of his ability, he thinks. He puts country over self, which is going to be kind of like an ideology that's going to be adopted in Roman culture, because all Roman culture is going to come from a Trojan heritage, at least in the mythology of it all. And so students tend to like Hector for this reason, because he has this air of selflessness and virtue about him. And then he goes to his father Priam's house and talks to his mother, Hecuba. She offers him a glass of wine to drink to Zeus, but he declines. And this is part of his declination. We're on page 202, and in that last stanza, starting around line 317, if you'll read along with me, this is his refusal. Listen, and then kind of like a directive that he gives his mom after declining this glass of wine to toast for Zeus. He says, "No, mother, do not fetch me wine in case it weakens me and I forget my will to fight. And I would feel ashamed to pour bright wine for Zeus with unwashed hands." So you see that he's got that duty and upstandingness about him. "A person smeared with blood and gore should not pray to the son of Cronus, god of dark clouds, but you must gather all the older women and go with holy offerings to the temple of great Athena, goddess of the spoils, and take the loveliest and largest robe, the one you value most in all of the house, and lay it in the lap of great Athena, the goddess with the braided hair, and promise to sacrifice inside her shrine for her 12 yearling heifers, perfect offerings, whose backs have never felt the goad. And if she pities the town and wives and little children of holy Troy, and keeps away the son of Tydeus, the fearsome Diomedes, whose spear can turn his enemies to flight." Go on now to the temple of Athena, goddess of looting and the spoils of war. And meanwhile, I will go and summon Paris to come with me if he will hear my words. I wish the earth would gape and swallow him. He's not feeling really good about his brother right now. Olympian Zeus protected him and raised him as a catastrophe for all Trojans, including valiant Priam and his children. If I saw Paris going down to Hades, my mind would start forgetting grief and pain. The jabs in this book, they don't disappoint. So folks, essentially, he declines this wine, tells his mom to get all of the Trojan women together that are older and then give this sacrifice to Athena. But this is a mistake that he makes, mostly because all this effort doesn't matter. Athena is sympathetic to the Achaean or the Greek cause, so it's literally futile for Hector and any of these Trojan women to lend these offerings at her temple. So, all in one page, I admire Hector for wanting to keep his sound mind and fighting spirit by not taking the wine, but his efforts are null. Such is the trend with Hector, with Hector over and over again. And I hate to say this, and this may be me reading too much into it, but Hector and Achilles are their character fools in this story for a reason. Not just because they're both the greatest warrior for each side of the war, but they both harbor great anger. Hector is big mad at his brother, and it's much more palpable because Hector's problem is inside his own house. The reason for the war is so intimate to Hector, and he can't escape it because his brother is at the very center of it. Hector's burden feels a bit more digestible to readers because it's obviously more relatable to family dynamics that some of us also live in, while Achilles' reason to be at war is just much more prophetic, and it's much more difficult to digest. So we're able to anchor a lot of this all of this reasoning and this emotional management and the decisions that he makes into real life, because this is real life for him. So Hector coming home to Troy, it's going to humanize him a bit more as a soldier for the Trojan cause. Instead of just faceless enemies, we see mothers, wives, and siblings desperate to protect their homes. The key thing I'd like you to take away from these first couple of passages is that I hope you'll see Hector as a leader, a son, and a brother. And then we're later going to see him as a husband. His duty extends beyond the battlefield into his city and his family. And these domestic moments, at least in theory, are ways for Homer to remind us that war is not abstract, it devastates real communities. And so on page 204, Hector confronts Paris, and Paris is, kind of lingering in his chambers. And instead of fighting, and that's okay, I guess, Helen will be there too, around line 393. Read along with me to get all of the details of this confrontation. So this is brothers at it a little bit. On page 204, starting at line 393. Hector found Paris in his inner chamber, fiddling with his beautiful equipment. You can take that a number of ways, but his spear and breastplate, and his hands were stroking his curving bow. With him sat Argive Helen. And so Argive is kind of like an adjective form of Greek. Okay, it's like an elevated Greek. Among her slave girls, she was telling them to manufacture splendid thread and cloth. Seeing his brother, Hector scolded him with words to bring him shame. So this is strong brother scolding his brother. You are so strange. It is not right for you to be so angry. The troops around our city and high wall are dying. War is raging around this town because of you. And you yourself would challenge and fight with anyone you saw hold back from hateful war, as you were doing now. Come on, get up, or very soon our city will burn with blazing fire. And godlike Paris, great Alexander answered, Hector, yes, you scold me just enough and not too much. So is that beauty coming out in him again? He knows exactly what to say. So let me tell you something. Listen, please, and pay attention. I do not sit here inside my bedroom out of irritation or anger at the Trojans. Because you remember at the end of book 3, he pretty much he screwed up a little bit and didn't just make more, I guess, incendiary enemies on the Greek side, but some of his own colleagues, you could call them, are kind of like, man, dude, fight. So he's living in that. He says, I was grieving. I tried to turn myself entirely over to sadness, but just now my wife was saying gently, persuasively, that I should go back to war. And I myself believe that that will be the better choice for me. Just wait for me while I put on my armor, or go ahead and I will catch you up. He spoke, but bright-helmed Hector made no answer. Then Helen spoke and tried to make him stay. Talking about him is in Hector. So this is Helen again speaking to her brother-in-law. Brother-in-law, I am a source of fear and a source of evil strategy, a dog. I hate that she calls herself that, but there's so much symbolism in that I think is a good opportunity for you to break down why would she would even think of herself as a dog. I wish that at the start, right when my mother gave birth to me, a cruel gust of wind had carried me to the mountains or the waves of loud resounding sea and swept me off before all this could happen. But the gods ordained these troubles as they came to pass. I wish I shared a bed with someone better, a man who understood the condemnation his actions would incur from other people. This man has no good sense, no self control, and no capacity to change. So Helen's not very happy with Paris, very frustrated. One day he surely will receive his retribution. But come now, brother, sit down here with me. You have endured the greatest pain and grief because of us, because of me, a dog, and Paris with his folly and delusion. Zeus set an evil lot upon us all to make us topics of a singer's tale for people in the future still unborn. Some duplicity in that. And that song, that singer's tale, we get to kind of delve into now as we read this. Then mighty Hector of the flashing helmet replied, You must not make me sit down, Helen. Despite your love for me, I will not do it. I feel already such a strong desire to go protect the Trojans. In my absence, they miss me terribly. What you should do is rally this man. Let him rouse himself and reach the battlefield before I do, while I am here inside the town of Troy. I must go see my family at home, my darling wife and little baby son. You see, I do not know if I will ever return to them again. This time the gods may crush me underneath the hands of the Greeks. So you can see kind of here, even in this exchange, Hector is totally locked in on war. And this exchange among Hector, Paris, and Helen is just going to reinforce the contrast between these two brothers. Hector represents duty, while Paris represents a selfish desire, at least for right now. Paris isn't cowardly exactly because he's really skilled at combat, but his priorities are not the same as Hector's. This is why Homer often presents Paris as a foil to his brother. Hector embodies the responsibility of the city. Paris is still struggling with his own responsibility to himself. So they are on different parts of their journey and digesting their larger role in this great war. And so finally, this is my favorite. Hector meets his wife, Andromache, and their infant son, Astyanax. I'm not going to lie. Just bear with me. This is all very sweet and warm because this is the love story of the book, and it makes me so happy to share it with you today. So, if you're on page 205, we are going to start with the last stanza, picking up where we left off on what I just read. So, bottom of 205, starting around line 460. Then Hector in his flashing helmet left her, and quickly reached his own fine, well-built home. But in the hall he did not find his wife, white-armed Andromache. She had gone up onto the city wall and stood there grieving and sobbing. She was with her well-dressed slave who held the baby. And when Hector saw his noble wife was not inside the house, he stood just in the doorway on the threshold and called out to the women slaves, "Come here and talk to me. You have to tell the truth. Where is Andromache? Why is she out? Where did she go? To visit with my sisters, or to my brothers' wives who wear fine dresses, or to the temple of the fearsome goddess Athena, where the other Trojan women whose hair is finely braided say their prayers?" The capable chief house slave answered him, "Hector, you told us we must speak the truth. Your wife has gone out to see your sisters, has not gone out to see your sisters, or to your brothers' wives who wear fine dresses, or to the temple of the fearsome goddess Athena, where the other Trojan women go with their hair in braids to say their prayers. She rushed towards the wall because she heard the Trojans had been losing, and the Greeks have gained the enormous power. She ran off as if beside herself in a manic frenzy. The nurse slave went with her and brought the baby." So Andromache's not totally losing it, but she's a little panicked because she thinks that there may be something bad that has happened to her husband, Hector. And so the woman finished speaking. Hector dashed out of the house and back the way he came, through the great town, along the well-kept streets, and when he reached the scanned gates, which led out to the battlefield, she ran to meet him. Andromache, the wife for whom he gave so many gifts to take her as his bride. She was the daughter of King Aetion, who lived beneath the woodland of Mount Placus in Thebes, ruling in the Cilicians, excuse me. This daughter of a king was now the wife of Hector in his armor made of bronze. She ran to meet him, and the slave came too, bringing the baby cuddled in her arms. He was still, he was so little still, tiny baby and innocent. Hector adored his baby boy, his son, who was as beautiful as a bright star. Hector had named him one thing, but others called him Astyanax, the city's lord, because his father, Hector, was the one who kept Troy safe. Imagine the pressure. The more we read this, I think, man, everybody has staked all of their hopes and dreams and safety onto this one person who didn't ask for any of this to happen. Now Hector saw his child and smiled at him in silence, saying nothing. Andromache stood next to him in tears, grasping his hand, and spoke to him and said, "What are you doing, Hector, you strange man? Your will to fight will kill you. Do you feel no pity for your little baby son or me and my disastrous lot in life? Soon I shall be your widow. Soon the Greeks, all of them, rushing at you all at once, will kill you. Then for me, when I have lost you, better that I sink down below the earth. There can be no more comfort afterwards for me when you are dead, but only pain. I have no father and no noble mother because godlike Achilles killed my father." So this is even more touching home for them because Andromache knows what kind of danger Achilles is. He's cost her so much already that he could close in, and that fierceness and then the ferociousness could take away her husband too. He breached the towering gates and sacked my city, where the Cilicians once lived in peace. Achilles killed the king, my father, and did not strip the armor from his corpse. Um, they burned the body along with his ornate, well fashioned weapons and heaped a mound to mark the space around it. The mountain goddesses made elm trees grow as a result. And Andromache had 7 brothers. All of them went to Hades in one day because Achilles killed them all. I mean, she's recounting all of this, and she's got so much stress that she likely it's difficult for her to unburden to anybody else. Talks about her mother was brought to as a slave by Achilles, along with all of their looted treasure. And we're already seeing in book 1 how all of that goes down. Um, Women are become slaves and prizes of war, and then used, I guess, appropriately for their purpose, which is me putting it lightly because I want to be really delicate with my language about that. And it's one of the most beautiful parts of this entire speech here starts on 545, the line 545. She says, Hector, you are my father and my mother. You are my brother and the vigorous man whose bed I share. Please think of me, have pity, and stay here on the wall. Please do not make your son an orphan and your wife a widow. So I know that'll be on your quiz about who says that. But she's essentially begging him not to return to battle, telling him she's, already lost her family to Achilles and doesn't want to lose him too. Hector responds here that he must fight. His honor and duty demand it. But he also acknowledges his own fear for her future. So not only is she pouring it all out for him, he's going to give her some of his emotional reason why. Like it's not just the duty and the honor. There's some love going on here that he wants to protect her too. So on page 207, starting around line 560-ish, 561, this is Hector's response to her, pouring it all out there for him. He says, Woman, I care about all these things too, but I feel overwhelming shame in front of the Trojan women in their trailing dresses and Trojan men if I shrink back from war, turn the page, as if I were a coward. And my spirit tells me I must not stop because I learned always to be a warrior and fight among the frontline champions of Troy to win great glory for the king, my father, and for myself. You see, my heart and mind know this for sure, that there will be a day when holy Troy will be destroyed and Priam, lord of the Ashwood spear, and all our people. But no one matters more to me than you. No pain that anyone in Troy will suffer, not even Hecuba or High King Priam, not even all my many noble brothers who will be slaughtered by our enemies and fall them in the dust in days to come. No pain of theirs affects me more than yours. One day some bronze-armed Greek will capture you and you will weep, deprived of all your freedom. And then you will weave to serve another woman in Argos. You will have to carry water from the rivers entirely against your will, but forced by strong necessity. And sometimes people will see you weeping there and they'll say, That woman used to be the wife of Hector, who was the greatest champion of Troy during the Trojan War. When they say that, your pain and grief will feel brand new again. because you do not have a man like me to save you from the day of your enslavement. But as for me, I hope I will be dead and lying underneath a pile of earth so that I did not have to hear your screams and watch when they are dragging you away. At the end of this response, I can't help but sit here and kind of feel through this. Like Hector has a lot to lose. Andromache has a lot to lose. And there's a lot of emotional baggage that Hector carries into the war, aside from all of the hopes and dreams that his city puts on him, and then, all of the fears his wife has. I think that they would have made a beautiful couple in this kind of domestic bliss situation where they could be a mother and father to their son, have happy times. But Hector fights, I think, with this pretty beautiful hope that this is not going to be her future, that this is not going to be his wife's future, that she wouldn't be enslaved. And you kind of have to live out for the hope of it all, that this is not going to come to pass. Um, and it weighs a lot for both of them. And it complicates Hector's character further because we see him as this husband and father, not just this great warrior on the battlefield. He's this really complex person, and this speech is heartbreaking because he knows all of these things are going to happen, and that Andromache will suffer as a widow and a slave later on, and it's because it's already been prophesied, but he can't escape any of it. He just, he's kind of trapped in it the way that everybody else in this war is. And there's tension in this conversation between these two because Hector is both tender to her and just lays it out like she did, but he's still bound by the duty. It oozes out of everything he says and does, and it motivates his very action and his inactions. And this scene between these two foreshadows some of the epic's tragedy on the whole. And one of these kind of, I guess, greater sentences that you can take away from what the Iliad means, that love cannot overcome the demands of war and honor, especially in this culture. And so, the last part I want to read to you is just so sweet. And it's a solidifying passage for me, and like so many of you, as to why we have a hard time, especially after reading book 6, about whose side we're on. It's hard to choose sides because after this is the cherry on the sundae for me. We get to see Hector with his son Astyanax in this really cute exchange. So they're still kind of at the bottom of 208. That next stanza, starting at line, I think 599, see this really cute exchange between Hector and his son. Then noble Hector reaches toward his son. The baby wailed and wiggled back to snuggle into his well-groomed nurse's lap and dress. The child was scared by how his father looked, shocked at the terrifying horsehair plume that nodded at the top part of his helmet. His loving father and his mother laughed. Hector immediately took off his helmet and put it on the ground. It glittered brightly. Then glorious Hector kissed his darling son and took him in his arms to rock and cuddle and pray to Zeus and all of the other gods. And that prayer essentially is, I hope they say when he comes back to war, this man is so much better than his father, talking about Astyanax, and that he hopes that he's going to grow big and strong, and that he brings bloodstained arms and armor back from any of his great escapades and makes his mother happy, essentially hoping that his son will be an even greater man than he is. And it's so sad. So, in other words, with all of this, when Hector reaches out to his son, what happens here is like the baby recoils in fear because of Hector's helmet. Hector laughs, he removes his helmet, and he lifts the child up into his arms. And this prayer to Zeus is kind of a liver punch because it's such a pretty idea and it's an honorable wish, but it's not going to be true. This small moment between father and son has so much symbolism in it. The helmet itself, the emblem of war, terrifies the child who only recognizes his father without it. So it's a powerful image to show us just how unnatural war is, especially through the lens of a child. Hector can be both a loving father and a fearsome warrior, but those roles don't easily coexist. The scene reminds us that soldiers carry both of these burdens, the duty to protect their family and the reality that the very tools of protection also cause fear. And so the rest of the book kind of narrates Hector encouraging Andromache to make herself busy, comfort herself with her loom and her homemaking. And when she walks away, she like looks back at him frantically several times in desperate tears. And then meanwhile, Paris puts his own armor on, and Homer details how beautiful Paris looks in it. The closing speech of Book 6 shows Hector telling Paris that, yes, he is a brave soldier, but he holds back too much. He's got to find his strength. And the Trojans need all the strength that they can get to ward off the Greeks, which is a sobering ending to one book in an entire narrative that has so far seemed so largely sympathetic to the Greek cause. Every time I finish book 6, I just want the war to end because I don't want to choose sides. Look at everything that Hector has to lose: Andromache, Astyanax, Priam, the king, Hecuba. And I mean, even Paris, he's not being his brother necessarily, but I think he's got a whole lot to lose. And even if it's his dignity, that's something I would like people to be able to keep intact. I want these people to live because they are so vivid and complex, especially these good people of Troy who really didn't ask for any of this. And so, in sum, book 6 is the single most human book that we've read so far of the Iliad this week, in my opinion. War is still raging, but Homer pauses to remind us of what's at stake, really. Because if it's all the theater of war, you don't get to see the families, the cities, the potential futures. And then Hector, more than any other character, embodies this tragic balance between love and duty. And to me, Homer uses these domestic scenes to have us question how war really matters at all. And so, thank you for making it through another book with me. And I hope to see you soon for the next one. See you later.